CDL Practice Test, California, Air Brake, Part 1. Question number 1. How does letting up on the brake pedal release the brakes? A. The system releases the brakes through a combination of air being released and the brake levers being loosened. B. Compressed air is pushed back into the air tanks. C. The action releases the brake pads. D. Some compressed air is let out of the system, causing the brake pads and or shoes to disengage. The correct answer is here, D. Some compressed air is let out of the system, causing the brake pads and or shoes to disengage. Explanation. When a person lets go of the brake pedal, the air pressure in the air tanks is reduced by letting air out of the system. This causes the brakes to be released. Question number 2. How should you check that the spring brakes come on when the air pressure in the system drops below a certain level? A. Park on level ground. Wait for normal air pressure. Release the parking brake. Move the truck forward slowly and apply the brakes firmly using the brake pedal. B. Park on level ground. Chock the wheels. Release the parking brake when you have enough air pressure. Shut the engine off and repeatedly press and release the brake pedal. C. Park on a slight incline. Drain off air pressure. Set the parking brakes and check for movement. The correct answer is here, B. Park on level ground. Chock the wheels. Release the parking brake when you have enough air pressure. Shut the engine off and repeatedly press and release the brake pedal. Explanation. When doing your final check of your air brake, you should cause your vehicle to have low air pressure. To be sure the warning signal comes on by turning the engine off with the wheels chocked and pushing on and off the brakes to release the air pressure. Once you're sure the low pressure warning is viable, continue doing the same until the spring brakes come on automatically, usually between 20-45 C. Question number 3. Why must you study air brakes in the state of California? A. Otherwise, you can only get a CDL permit. B. Otherwise, you cannot get a CDL at all. C. All trucks have air brakes in California. D. Otherwise, you will have to get a CDL with restrictions. The correct answer is here, D. Otherwise, you will have to get a CDL with restrictions. Explanation. In California, if you have not studied and passed the section of the CDL exam on air brakes, you will only be able to get a CDL that restricts you to driving vehicles without air brakes. So good luck. Question number 5. You'll know that your brakes are failing if A. You release the brake pedal and your speed increases. B. The brake feels spongy when you apply pressure. C. You have to press the brake pedal harder than usual to control your speed. The correct answer is here, C. You have to press the brake pedal harder than usual to control your speed. Explanation. If your brakes begin to fade, you'll notice that you have to press the brake pedal harder to achieve the same braking effect as before. If your vehicle is so equipped, check the application pressure gauge to see just how much pedal effort you are employing. If the brakes continue to fade, you may not be able to slow down or stop at all. Question number 6. When you press the brake pedal, A. Compressed air is released from the air tanks. B. Compressed air is released from the brake chambers. C. Compressed air enters the brake chambers. The correct answer here, C. Compressed air enters the brake chambers. Explanation. Pressing down on the brake pedal lets air into each brake chamber, forcing the brake pads against the inside of the drum, or the rotor for disc brakes. Question number 7. If the safety valve begins releasing air, you should A. Make sure there is alcohol in the alcohol evaporator. B. Manually drain the valve as there may be moisture in the system. C. Ease up on braking. D. Have the governor and or lines checked by a mechanic. The correct answer here, D. Have the governor and or lines checked by a mechanic. Explanation. If the safety valve is releasing air, something is wrong and you should have your truck evaluated by a mechanic immediately. Question number 8. Air tanks must be drained. A. To drain moisture and oil out of the tanks. B. To tell you how much air is in the tanks. C. To drain all the air out of the tanks. The correct answer here, A. To drain moisture and oil out of the tanks. Explanation. Water and oil from the compressor can collect in the air tanks and must be drained daily to prevent brake failure. Question number 9. The air storage tanks, A. Hold only enough air for one braking cycle. B. Do not hold air unless there is an emergency. C. Hold enough air for the brakes to be used several times if the compressor stops working. The correct answer here, C. Hold enough air for the brakes to be used several times if the compressor stops working. Explanation. The air storage tanks in an air brake system store compressed air to be used for braking. They hold enough air for the brakes to still be used several times if the compressor stops working. Question number 10. Most heavy-duty vehicles nowadays have a dual air brake system. What is a dual air brake system? A. Two air brake systems that share the same set of air tanks. B. A primary air brake system for everyday use and a secondary air brake system only for emergencies. C. Two air brake systems with separate sets of controls. D. Two separate air brake systems that use a single set of brake controls. The correct answer here, D. Two separate air brake systems that use a single set of brake controls. Explanation. Dual air brake systems are used by most new heavy-duty vehicles to increase safety. They use two separate air brake systems with a single set of brake controls. Question number 11. During normal driving, spring brakes are usually held back by A. Springs. B. Air pressure. C. Bolts and braces. The correct answer here, B. Air pressure. Explanation. Spring brakes contain powerful springs that are held back by air pressure. If the pressure drops too low, the spring brakes will automatically kick in. Question number 12. Chemical changes in the brake lining, which reduce friction and cause expansion of the brake drums, is known as A. Brake overheating. B. Green fade. C. Surface scorch. D. Brake fade. The correct answer here, D. Brake fade. Explanation. Excessive heat causes chemical changes to the brake lining, which reduces friction, and it causes expansion of the brake drums. As this happens, the shoes and linings have to move farther to contact the drums, causing the brakes to fade. Question number 13. What kind of brakes do most newer heavy-duty trucks use? A. Single air brakes. B. Triple air brakes. C. Dual air brakes. The correct answer here, C. Dual air brakes. Explanation. Most newer heavy-duty vehicles use dual air brake systems. A dual air brake system has two separate air brake systems which use a single set of brake controls. Question number 14. The two markings on a front brake limiting valve usually read A. Low and high, B. Left and right, C. Normal and slippery. The correct answer here, C. Normal and slippery. Explanation. Some vehicles with their brake systems manufactured before 1975 have a front brake limiting valve with normal and slippery settings. Question number 15. To use anti-lock brakes properly, you should A. Pump the brake pedal, B. Brake extra hard, C. Brake normally. The correct answer here, C. Brake normally. Explanation. Anti-lock brakes will automatically keep your wheels from locking so you can brake normally. Question number 16. With the engine at operating RPM, air tank pressure in a dual system should build from 85C to 100C within how much time? A. 60 seconds. B. 30 seconds. C. 90 seconds. D. 45 seconds. The correct answer here, D. 45 seconds. Explanation. In a vehicle with standard air tanks, the time it takes to increase from 85C to 100C should be about 45 seconds. If the pressure does not build fast enough, the pressure may become too low while driving, which can be dangerous. Question number 17. How do brakes work on a long, steep downgrade? A. They work as the main braking mechanism. B. Not applicable. No braking effect is involved in a downgrade. C. They work as a supplement to the braking effect of your engine. D. They work as the main braking mechanism, with the engine braking effect as an emergency backup. The correct answer here, C. They work as a supplement to the braking effect of your engine. Explanation. When driving down long, steep downgrades, the braking effect of your engine is what's most important. Your brakes are only a supplement to your being in the proper low gear. They cannot compensate for being in an unsafe high gear without putting too much pressure on your brakes. Question number 18. Which of the following is not part of the drum brake? A. Return spring. B. Safety valve. C. Slack adjuster. D. Brake drum. The correct answer here. B. Safety valve. Explanation. Drum brakes are on each of your vehicle's axles and contain about 10 different parts, including the axle, slack adjuster, and brake drum itself. While a safety valve is part of an air brake system, it is not part of the drum brake. Question number 19. At what measurement is the safety valve usually set to open? A. 150 C. B. 100 C. C. 250 C. D. 200 C. The correct answer is here. A. 150 C. Explanation. The safety valve, which protects the system from excessive pressure, is usually set to open when the system reaches 150 C. Question number 20. An anti-lock braking system, ABS, A. activates when the wheels are about to lock up. B. decreases your normal braking capability. C. increases your normal braking capability. D. shortens your stopping distance. The correct answer is here. A. activates when the wheels are about to lock up. Explanation. ABS does not have much effect on your everyday driving. It does not affect your braking capability or shorten your actual stopping distance. It just helps you keep your vehicle in control by activating when your wheels are about to lock up. Question number 21. An air compressor governor controls A. how fast air is pumped into the air storage tanks. B. the temperature of the air pumped into the air storage tanks. C. when the air compressor pumps air into the air storage tanks. The correct answer is here. C. when the air compressor pumps air into the air storage tanks. Explanation. In an air brake system, the air compressor governor controls when the air compressor pumps air into the air storage tanks. Question number 22. What does it mean when the wig-wag drops a mechanical arm into your view? A. one or more of the braking systems has failed. B. the front brake limiting valve has cut the pressure to the front brakes. C. you are applying too much pressure to the brakes. D. the air pressure in the system has dropped below 60 C. The correct answer is here. D. the air pressure in the system has dropped below 60 C. Explanation. The wig-wag is another less common type of warning when the C in the air tanks drops below 60. Usually the warning is a red light or a buzzer. The wig-wag drops a mechanical arm into view until the pressure in the air tanks has been restored to normal. Question number 23. The service brake system applies A. the parking brake when you use the parking brake control. B. the brakes when you depress the brake pedal during normal driving. C. the brakes in an emergency. The correct answer is here. B. the brakes when you depress the brake pedal during normal driving. Explanation. Air brakes are actually three braking systems in one: the emergency brake, the parking brake, and the service brake. As these terms suggest, when you depress the brake pedal in normal driving, it's the service brake system that applies the brakes. Question number 24. To drive a tractor trailer with air brakes, you must have A. A class A CDL. B. Any CDL without an air brakes restriction. C. A class A CDL without an air brakes restriction. The correct answer is here. C. A class A CDL without an air brakes restriction. Explanation. To legally pull a trailer whose gross vehicle weight rating, GCWR, exceeds 10,000 pounds, you'll have to obtain a class A CDL. If you don't pass a knowledge test on air brakes, your CDL will include a restriction limiting you to driving only vehicles without air brakes. Question number 25. Which of the following can cause brakes to fail or fade? A. Brakes being out of adjustment. B. Not relying on engine braking enough. C. Excessive use of the service brakes. D. All of the answers. The correct answer is here. D. All of the answers. Explanation. Fade and fail are usually due to incorrect use of the brakes that causes excess heat. This may be caused by incorrect brake adjustment, not enough reliance on engine braking, excessive use of the service brakes, or another mechanical factor or human error. Question number 26. What does an air compressor do in an air brake system? A. It fills the tires. B. It moves air to the back of the truck. C. It pumps air into the air storage tanks. The correct answer is here. C. It pumps air into the air storage tanks. Explanation. In an air brake system, the air compressor pumps air into the air storage tanks. The air compressor is controlled by the air compressor governor. Question number 27. If your vehicle has an alcohol evaporator, you should daily in cold weather. A. Check the oil for alcohol content. B. Check the alcohol level and refill as needed. C. Completely replace the alcohol. The correct answer is here. B. Check the alcohol level and refill as needed. Explanation. Alcohol vapor from the alcohol evaporator helps keep ice from forming in the lines and valves of the air brake system. Check the alcohol level daily and refill as needed. Question number 28. The application pressure gauge shows the amount of air pressure. A. In the modulating control valve. B. That you are applying to the brakes. C. In the tanks. The correct answer is here. B. That you are applying to the brakes. Explanation. If your vehicle is so equipped, the application pressure gauge will show how much air pressure you are applying to the brakes. If you have to apply more pressure than before to achieve the same braking effect, your brakes are fading.